like a little baby child, like the people going wild. It's still all just a miracle, a miracle, miracle.
Bravo, bravo, bravo. Well, I'm going to sit again today. It's so wonderful sitting and seeing all your beautiful shining faces and smiles. And so thank you for being here and being present in the presence. We are, I came across a cartoon, a Peanuts cartoon. And Charlie Brown is out on the pitcher's mound, and Linus and Lucy are kind of standing around, coming over and talking to him. And Linus says, "If you can get this last man out, Charlie Brown, we'll win the game. And therefore, I would suggest you throw him a curve." Lucy says, No, don't do that. Throw him a drop." Charlie Brown says, "This world is filled with people who are anxious to function in an advisory capacity." Anybody notice that? There are so many opinions in this universe, aren't there? And we all, I came across, I think I got this in one of my meditations, but opinions are like noses. Everybody's got one, right? The problem is we tend to stick them in other people's business at times. And so I want to talk a little bit about this idea of all the different voices that we have coming at us. And they're not only coming at us, but they're coming inside of us also. We've talked about this idea of having a committee in our head, and they tend to always try to overrule each other. Have you noticed that? We have this committee going on, and there's this committee meeting, and it goes round and round, and it's we call it sometimes the monkey mind. But there's also a voice that comes through when we are able to not necessarily shut up the committee, but at least we can step back from the voices of the committee, and so that we can hear something that's really more clear and more aware and more based in an awareness of the truth of our nature and the truth of our being. Herb Goldberg said, "The struggle to learn to listen and to respect our own intuitive inner prompting is the greatest challenge of all." I think in many ways that's really a big part of our spiritual work, our spiritual path here, is learning how to listen to that, what the psalm calls the still small voice. The still small voice, and there's a voice inside of us that really is always available to us, trying to show us and give to us a greater awareness and a greater blessing, not only in this life, but in all of our aspects of our being, I think, throughout the universe, a larger perspective for that matter. And so that's one of the reasons why sometimes we have trouble hearing and listening to that still small voice, because it's communicating something that's not necessarily just about what's going on here in this world, in this life. And so sometimes we miss or don't hear the message clearly because we're coming from our own intellectual awareness about it, and from our own engagement, or actually probably a better term would be our identification with our outside world. We become so identified with things going on out here that we don't recognize that there's a message coming through that's really about something even more than what's going on out here. Does that make sense? So when I thought about this, I mean, there's a spirit within every one of us. There's a spirit in man, and the breath of the Almighty gives inspiration. I always like that, because the word spirit really comes from the word spiritus, which means to breathe. And to breathe in spiritus actually means breathe in, or to inspire. to inspire. So we are always in a place where we can breathe in not just breath, not just air, not just, or pollution for that matter, but to breathe in a deeper knowing, a deeper consciousness, you might say, of our nature and the nature of the universe, the nature of our world, and the nature of the activities and things that are going on out in our life. Spirit. I've been really reflecting on that idea of what spirit really is, and one of the things that spirit is that which inspires or breathes life into something or someone, and it really is the giver of life. And so in a real sense, it is an expression of the faculty or the divine power, as Charles Fillmore called it in the 12 Powers of Man. It is an action of the energy of life itself. And it's an activity of not only life, but of all of the 12 powers within each of our nature, of faith, of understanding, of will, of zeal. Linda Martella-Whitsitt last week talked to us about this understanding of each of us has all of these amazing qualities within our nature, and those are oftentimes referred to as light. Her talk last week was really on divine audacity, dare to be the light of the world. And so I really think that we're called to really pay attention and notice and listen more and more to that inner voice that is calling us to bring forth these different characteristics and qualities in different experiences in our lives. In Keep a True Lent, Charles Fillmore said, man is never without a guide. No matter how loudly he may be crying out for leading, there is always a hand, at hand, a sure torchbearer. Let me read that again. There is always at hand a sure torchbearer. And if he will but follow the light, it is too simple. It is too easy. And sometimes I think that's why we miss it. We miss it because it is oftentimes something that is so simple that we think, well, it can't be that. That our intellect basically has to make things challenging and difficult. Because we are, you might say, we're kind of addicted to figuring things out and fixing them, aren't we? It seems to be a big part of what we get caught up in life. We manifest what we call problems, and those problems are really just memories of how we think things are supposed to be, rather than really acknowledging and recognizing that they are the way they are, and that not only are they the way they are, but in each and everything that is the way it is, there is a special gift. It's hard to see because sometimes the way things are hurt, and we have pain. And generally we have pain because we're resisting what is. And so part of our unfolding spiritually is learning how to, in a very real sense, breathe through the pain that is trying to give birth to something that is greater than our current awareness or conception of what's possible, or what's a higher good, or what's a greater blessing. You know, and I think this image, I think, is really valuable, and it is actually of giving birth. That in a real sense, when we find ourselves faced with challenges and difficulties and struggles, it's valuable, I think, to recognize this as simply labor. It's a labor of trying to give birth to something that is greater than what we are currently living. It's a way of trying to help us to break through and break out of some of our limited belief systems and our stuck energy and our what I call our yeah buts. Some of you heard me talk about our yeah buts. I had a prayer class that I gave one time, and we were talking about how we manifest different things in prayer and how things, can come about. And someone said, "Yeah, but," and I stopped and said, "Yeah, that's exactly what's stopping the prayer, the yeah, but." So whenever we have those kinds of thoughts that say, "Yeah, but," we're actually holding more energy on what we're resisting what's possible, and we're not holding to the greater possibility. And so part of our unfolding in this spiritual work is really to learn how to listen to our GPS, our inner GPS. And I heard this term recently as our God possibility system. Isn't that a great term? GPS. How many of you use a GPS, like in your car? Yeah, we all do. And, mine has a British accent. And she'll say, "Turn right here." And sometimes I'll listen to her, and sometimes I go, "No, no, no, no." And I think we do that sometimes with Spirit because we have a better way, right? And sometimes that's true with our electronic GPSs. But I'm going to suggest to you that oftentimes I find that even our electronic GPS, my electronic GPS, will take me on a route that seems kind of out of the way, but then I realized later that there was some obstacle that was in the way that I was trying to go. And so oftentimes it'll take me a little longer route around, but it'll actually help me avoid some obstacle. I think our God possibilities system does that as well. When we learn to pay attention, we learn to listen to it. So how do we listen to the voice of Spirit? How do we listen to that Christ mind? Or how do we listen to our authentic nature? In Psalms chapter 25, verse 9, it says, "The meek he will guide in judgment, and the meek will he teach his way." And so I thought about that word meek, and I have to say that there are times that I have not really been real crazy about that word meek. It always, when I was growing up, I always heard the meek shall inherit the earth. But to me, what I heard in that was meek simply meant that you were some kind of a doormat. And I've played that role in my life at different times and let people and circumstances and situations walk all over me. Anybody else ever done that? Am I the only one? Oh, okay. I don't think so. There's a part of us that really does let sometimes circumstances walk all over us because we think that we're supposed to be meek. But meek doesn't mean to be a doormat. It does mean, however, to be open. It does mean to be receptive. It does mean to be, it does mean that we are in that place where we can let go of our need to control. Nobody else has that issue, right? So there is a part of our mind, there's a part of our ego brain that says that we have to be in charge and in control of everything. Because if we don't, it's all going to hit the fan, right? But what I've experienced is that when I really try to hold on to that need to control, that's when everything hits the fan. Am I right? And so part of our work is to learn how to tune into a deeper awareness. Because in reality, when we have this feeling or a need to control, it really is an illusion, isn't it? On an ego consciousness, on a intellectual mind awareness, there is no such thing as control. We have no control. Ultimately, whatever is going on in our life and world is not in our conscious control. Now, I'm going to suggest to you that I think in some ways it probably is in our subconscious control to some extent, because our subconscious is actually really what is actually helping to form and shape our awareness and our insights and our experiences out here in our world. We have a tendency to think that we somehow can change things by changing our conscious thoughts, but our conscious thought will actually not necessarily change what's going on out here in the world, but it can change what's going on inside of us. And then by changing what goes on inside of us in our subconscious level, it'll actually begin to change some of the circumstances and experiences out here in the world. And that's part of our work of transformation, is being open and willing to allow our conscious mind to participate in shifting and changing what goes on and what's gone on in our subconscious mind from our past experiences and from all the programming that we've experienced, both from our past experiences and from what Charles Fillmore called our race consciousness. So letting go of the need of the control, and we also have to be willing to even let go of our need to control some of those inner voices. We have a tendency to find ourselves becoming aware of our monkey mind, and then we try to suppress that. We try to push those voices down. And interestingly enough, they wind up going down into our subconscious mind, and they get even louder sometimes because they'll pop up in different places in different ways. Usually they pop up on people we work with or our family, and interestingly enough, they pop up all over the place on our politicians. Have you noticed that? Especially the parts we don't like, or maybe the parts we do like. So we put a lot of that out there in the world. And so part of our work in really learning how to listen to that still small voice is, one, is becoming aware of all the voices, becoming aware of the monkey mind, without the need to try to make them different. What I've been really getting a lot lately is, as I've shared with many of you, the work of Matt Kahn, who wrote this amazing work called Whatever Arises, Love That. And I've come to realize that a lot of times the things that come up in my monkey mind are coming up because there is a part of my awareness, my spirit, my consciousness that is needing to experience love. And my tendency is to try and find something or someone out here to feel that need for love. But what Matt has really shared in this work is that ultimately what that voice within me is crying for is a need for me to love that part of myself. Learn to love that voice. And so part of the exercise that he has people do is just simply say to that chattering, upset, fearful, or whatever kind of voice is coming up in the committee, just say, I love you, and just say it over and over again. And interestingly enough, there's a really power, Paul said it this way, perfect love casts out fear. So when we really, and perfect love really is that love that we have for ourselves. And I'm talking about not necessarily just the small self. We're kind of talking about the larger, grander, divine nature of each and every one of us. And each of these are parts that we have split off in some way that says that somehow that's not a part of that. But when we begin to love even that part of ourselves, it actually begins to heal that split so that we're not trying to push it away. We're not trying to cut off that part of our nature in some way, but we're recognizing it is a part of the whole. And then we actually are able to experience more of our wholeness and our more complete, full nature as a spiritual being. We are spiritual beings. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. And I would say sometimes, of course, it's important to recognize that we're also human beings we're having a spiritual experience at times. And so sometimes we're coming from our human nature and we are being awakened to our spiritual nature. And other times we're in our spiritual nature and we are becoming aware of our human nature. And I think that if we try to cut ourselves off from our human nature, we're actually also cutting ourselves off from part of our spiritual nature. Does that make sense? And so it's not that we're trying to just be these high, holy, spiritual beings, but that we're trying and working and striving to experience and become awakened to the holiness of our being, of our whole being, of all of who and what we are, of our wholeness. And our true nature, our spiritual nature, really includes all of it. And so we don't become more spiritual by somehow shaming or putting aside some of our more human aspects of who and what we are. But in a real sense, we become more spiritual by really learning how to honor and accept and heal and appreciate and value even, yes, those things that we have seen as human. I remember some years ago hearing a lesson from a Methodist minister, as I recall, and he was talking about this idea that, well, I'm only human. And one of the things he was pointing out, which I really resonated with, is rather than saying, well, I'm only human, you say, well, after all, I am human. And there's a difference. It's a different understanding, because there's not an only in there. And so when you do something, and the way he put it was this, he says, when you find yourself having some great experience, you don't say, well, I'm only human. You say, well, after all, I'm human. You think about the things that have been accomplished by human beings in this world. And to say something like, I'm only human, is really ridiculous, if you really think about it. The amazing things that have been accomplished through the human consciousness are phenomenal. And I'm suggesting to you that our spiritual nature is really fully expressed through our human nature as much as through that which is invisible to us. Does that make sense? And so we don't get out of the experience of being human. We don't become more spiritual by trying to be less human. In some ways, we actually become more spiritual by really learning how to really embrace and accept and appreciate and value all aspects of our nature. Yeah. The dark and the light. The shadow and the light. And if we can do that, we experience more of the wholeness of who and what we are. And interestingly enough, it begins to quiet much of that committee that goes on when we began to really listen to it more clearly. And we listen to those voices, and then we say, well, something like, thank you for sharing, and then listen more deeply. And listen to a place within you that is really trying to share with you a greater possibility of you, a greater possibility of what you are created to be, a greater possibility of a quality or characteristic that can show up for you in a particular circumstance or situation. And if you listen for that, the spirit within you will give you some insight. Sometimes it'll come, and I'll share with you, sometimes to me, sometimes in my meditation times, I do hear a clear voice. And it'll have things to say. And it'll say phrases that I just will resonate with and go, and feel and know that it's absolutely true. That there's a truth in whatever that phrase or word is that comes through. And it really is spirit. Inspiration. And it is the language of spirit. That's what inspiration really is. It is the language of spirit. And when we find ourselves inspired in some way to experience and to be and to share and to give and to express more of our greater possibilities in life, then we're listening to the language of spirit. I was reminded this last week, one of the most significant things we can do to kind of help us to really tune into that language of spirit, to really hear the inspiration that is already available to us, It's already, that voice is speaking 24/7. Like in our song this morning that Leanne sang, everything is holy now. It's always here. It's always present. And so part of our practice and part of our work is learning how to tune into it and begin to be open to seeing and experiencing from the place of our awareness of ourselves as spiritual beings having a human experience. And the more we can practice doing that, not only recognizing that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, but everybody else is also. Everybody that shows up, that steps on our toes, that gets in our way, that cuts us off in traffic, is a spiritual being here having a human experience. And sometimes part of that spiritual nature and part of the work that they're here to do is to show us what comes up inside of us whenever they do that. We don't like it. We think we're supposed to make it all wrong and fix them and blame them and tell them how bad they are. And, anybody ever been cut off in traffic and tried to make sure that, they knew exactly how you felt about that? How well does that work? Yeah. So part of their job is to show us what comes up inside of us when we have those kinds of experiences. To show us what can be transformed, to show us what can be loved, to show us what can be healed. And that's part of the work of Spirit, is to help us to have those kinds of experiences so that we can move into a greater knowing of our depth, of our breadth, of our possibility. This last week also, one of the things that helps us to do that is to really spend time in that place of silence that we talk about in Unity. Sitting in the silence. Sitting in the silence is one of the most profound and spiritual practices that you'll ever participate in. And silence in and of itself is not always silent. Some of you who practice this know what I'm talking about. Doesn't mean that the mind chatter completely goes away. It means that you no longer see yourself identified with all of those different voices, and you're open to simply hearing and being still and being quiet in a place where you can actually tune into something richer and deeper and more founded in the truth of divine nature, of your divine nature. And so you may find yourself sitting there and the mind can go on and on and on. You'll find yourself going off in different directions and thinking about the past or thinking about the future. And the work is not necessarily to beat yourself up or make yourself wrong by doing that. That's just another part of the monkey mind. Part of the work is just simply saying, oh, I'm doing that. Let's go back to this. Or maybe going back to your mantra, or going back to your breath, or going back to your affirmation, or going back to that place where you can just simply center in again and listen and be still again. I heard this last week that, do you know that the word silent and the word listen have the same letters? Think about it. I wonder if that's an accident. I don't think so. Yes, she says, Sherry says, there are no accidents. I agree. There are no accidents. So silent and listen have the same letters because they are a part of the same energy. And so part of our work in the silence is simply to be in that place of allowing and listening, to be open to hearing. All right, let's see. One of my notes I wrote is that it's not total stillness in meditation. It's more a lack of immersion of ourselves in or identification with all of the voices and the chatter. We stop identifying ourselves with all of those voices, with all that chatter, and just simply allow ourselves to be in the energy of openness and receptivity. Here's a wonderful psalm that I came across. He says, in Psalm 31:3, "For thou art my rock and my fortress, therefore thy name's sake lead me and guide me. Pull me out of the net that they have laid privy for me, for thou art my strength. Into thine hand I commit my spirit. Thou hast redeemed me, O Lord, God of truth." So when I think about this, name actually means our nature and the nature of the divine. And interestingly enough, do you know the word God was actually never in the original Bible? That was a German word that was used to was translated it into the word good. It actually is the word gut from the German, which means good. And so it was translated as God. Isn't that interesting? Well, the name of God is really the nature of God. It is the nature of the divine. And I'm going to suggest to you that the name, your true name, is also that name. It's the nature. It's your nature. And so part of what we're here to get free of are those things that snare us into believing that we are something other than what we truly are. And so when we take that time to listen to that still small voice, it helps free us from the snare of our entrapment of all those ideas, those limiting thoughts, those belief systems that we are somehow separate from or less than in some way that which is divine. How many of you are open for being free of the snare? So what are we willing to do to free ourselves from that? I'm going to suggest to you that listening to that silent inspiration is one of our most important and significant practices to free us from all of the snares of what's going on out here in the world and believing that somehow what's going on out here in the world is who we are and what we are about and what life is about. And when we do that, what we'll find is all the things that go on out here in the world begin to change. They begin to shift. And as we begin to listen more to that inspiration, we'll be given awarenesses of, one, ways for us to be in a different way. You know, Gandhi said, be the change you wish to see in the world. Or we'll be given very specific things to do. Or we'll be given very specific things to let go of. Or we'll be given very clear awarenesses about what is no longer ours and to move past it. So that's kind of the lesson that I've been getting this week. And as I tell everybody, these are my lessons. I just get to share them. So my lesson really is about listening to that language of spirit. And I hope you'll enjoy taking some time to listen to that language of spirit yourself as we go through the coming weeks. And so it is. Let's move into our meditation time.
You are holy, holy, holy. You are holy, holy, holy. You are holy, holy, holy. You are holy. I am holy, holy, holy. We are holy, holy, holy. I am holy, holy, holy. I am holy. We are holy. We are holy. Spirit divine.
So just take a nice deep breath now. Breathing into that heart space. Breathing in and breathing out and knowing that the inspiration of spirit is always present, is always available, and is always calling us and lifting us and guiding us to a greater knowing and experience and expression of our possibilities, possibilities for life and light, our possibilities to bless and to be blessed, our possibilities to learn and to grow. And so we take this time now in this place, this time of quietness, of silence, of stillness, to notice the voices, the thoughts, the awareness, but to recognize that we have thoughts, but we are not our thoughts. We have sensations, but we are not our sensations. And you might say to yourself, I have thoughts, but I am not these thoughts. And just breathe into that place in you that is observing and noticing thoughts. And if you have some sensation, just say to yourself, I have these sensations, but I'm not these sensations. And then just breathe into that place in you that is aware of sensation. And you may notice any feelings or emotions that come to you. Maybe it's a feeling of tension or tightness, or maybe it's a feeling of boredom. And just notice whatever emotions are there in you. And just see yourself and feel yourself breathing into those and just noticing and saying, I have feelings and emotions, but I'm not my feelings and emotions. And in your heart and mind, just send love to those thoughts, those sensations, those emotions. Send appreciation to them for just being there to show you more and more of who you are possible to be. And if there are little voices inside that seem to hold you back or limit you, just know that they're there to try and keep you safe. And just thank them and send them love. And then just listen. Listen more deeply to whatever voice is expressing its thought or feeling or emotion or even words that express even more of your oneness, your connection, your possibility as a spiritual being. And just allow that voice to ring through, and give thanks. Give thanks. Take a nice deep breath. give thanks for the greater possibilities that the Spirit that you are is moving in and through you to bring your life into a greater wholeness and fullness. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Take another nice deep breath, and when you're ready, gently open your eyes. We at Unity in the Heart of Austin are committed to inspiring people to awaken to their unique divine nature through spiritual teachings, through heart-to-heart connections, through prayer, and through sacred service. And we provide tools, spiritual tools, that allow you to live your best possible life. I'm Reverend Tony Roebuck, minister at Unity in the Heart of Austin, and I truly hope that you are inspired by and that you are transformed by, you enjoy this week's spiritual message. And if you would like to leave a donation, a tithe, to help the work of this ministry in supporting you and others like you, then we are truly grateful for your generosity and for helping to make the world a better place. Because we know that life is meant to be good.